Somewhere right now, a business owner is quietly convinced their idea just wasn't good enough. They're watching their business slow down, maybe even preparing to close it, and telling themselves a story about failure that isn't actually true. Here's the uncomfortable part. According to the U.S. Small Business Administration, 82% of small business failures are tied to cash flow problems. Not a bad idea, not insufficient demand, not even poor execution in the way most people imagine it. Cash flow, which means the overwhelming majority of businesses that fail were often solving a real problem, serving real customers, and generating real revenue, right up until the moment the money simply wasn't in the right place at the right time to keep the lights on. Before we get into why that happens and how to protect yourself from it, a quick introduction for anyone new here. I'm Jasmine. I hold a degree in business strategy and transformation, and for the past 7 years, I've studied why businesses succeed or fail, and this particular statistic, the 82% figure, is one of the ones that changed how I think about business risk more than almost anything else I've come across. Let's start by making sure we're actually clear on what cash flow means, because it's one of those terms people nod along to without fully internalizing. Cash flow is not the same thing as profit. A business can be profitable on paper, meaning revenue exceeds expenses over a given period, and still fail because the timing of when money actually arrives doesn't match the timing of when bills are due. Imagine a landscaping company that lands a big commercial contract worth $50,000 for a season of work. On paper, that's a huge win. In reality, the contract might pay net $60,000, meaning the client doesn't actually send payment until 60 days after the invoice is submitted. Meanwhile, the landscaping company still has to pay for fuel, equipment, and payroll every single week while waiting for that $50,000 to arrive. If they don't have enough cash sitting in reserve to cover those weeks of expenses, the business can be profitable on paper and completely out of money in reality at the exact same time. That gap between when money is earned and when money actually arrives in the bank account is where the vast majority of small business failures happen. Let's look at a few of the specific ways this plays out, because cash flow problem can sound abstract until you see it in concrete situations. Scenario 1. The growth trap. A business starts succeeding, takes on more customers or larger contracts, and has to spend money upfront on materials, labor, or inventory to fulfill that growth, often before the customer has paid for any of it. Counterintuitively, rapid growth is one of the most common cash flow killers, because growing faster means spending faster, and revenue almost always lags behind spending during a growth period. A business can quite literally grow itself into bankruptcy, which sounds backwards until you understand the mechanics of it. Scenario 2. The slow-paying client. Many businesses, especially those serving other businesses rather than individual consumers, extend payment terms of 30, 60, or even 90 days as a standard part of doing business. If a company doesn't have enough cash reserves to cover operating expenses during that payment gap, a single large client paying late, or a handful of clients all paying late around the same time, can create a cash crunch severe enough to sink an otherwise healthy business. Scenario 3. The seasonal swing. Businesses with seasonal demand, landscaping, tax preparation, holiday retail, tourism-related services, generate the bulk of their annual revenue in a concentrated window and have to budget carefully to cover expenses during the slower months. Business owners who don't plan explicitly for this seasonality, spending as though the busy season's revenue will continue year-round, frequently run out of cash during the off-season, even when their annual numbers, averaged out, would have shown a healthy, profitable business. Scenario 4, and this one is subtle, the inventory trap. A business that ties up too much cash in inventory, buying in bulk to get a better per-unit price, stocking up ahead of an anticipated demand spike, has effectively converted liquid cash into an illiquid asset that has to be sold before it turns back into usable money. If sales are slower than projected, that cash is stuck sitting on a shelf, unavailable to cover rent, payroll, or any other obligation that requires actual dollars, not boxes of product. Now here's what I find most important about all four of these scenarios. None of them are about the underlying business idea being bad. A landscaping company with great clients and real demand can fail from the growth trap. A consulting firm with excellent work and happy customers can fail from slow-paying clients. A seasonal business with strong annual revenue can fail from poor off-season planning. An otherwise smart retail business can fail from an inventory decision that seemed reasonable at the time. Every one of these is a management and planning failure, not an idea failure, and that distinction matters enormously because it means the solution isn't come up with a better idea. The solution is manage cash flow better, which is an entirely learnable, entirely fixable skill, rather than some mysterious quality your business idea either has or doesn't have. Let's talk about why this particular failure mode gets so badly misunderstood, both by the business owners experiencing it and by everyone watching from the outside. When a business closes, the public story almost always defaults to some version of the market didn't want it, or the timing wasn't right, or there was too much competition. Those explanations feel more comfortable, in a strange way, than the real answer, which is often something closer to, we didn't build enough of a cash buffer to survive a 60-day payment gap on our biggest contract. The idea failure story is more socially acceptable to tell, both to others and to yourself, because it doesn't implicate any specific decision you could have made differently. Blaming the idea, or the market, or bad luck feels less painful than acknowledging that a specific, correctable planning gap sank an otherwise sound business. But that comfort comes at a real cost, because if you walk away from a failed business believing your idea was the problem, you might abandon a genuinely good business model entirely, when what actually needed to change was how you managed the timing of money coming in versus money going out. Let's talk about how to actually protect a business from becoming part of that 82% statistic, because there are concrete, learnable practices here, not just vague advice to manage your money better. Practice 1. Build a cash reserve before you need it, not after. The general guidance from financial advisors working with small businesses is to maintain 3 to 6 months of operating expenses in reserve, specifically to cover the gap between when expenses are due and when revenue actually arrives, especially during a growth period or a slow season. This reserve is not optional overhead. It's the buffer that keeps a profitable business from becoming a failed business purely because of bad timing. Practice 2. Understand your cash conversion cycle for your specific business, meaning the average amount of time between spending money on a project or product and actually receiving payment for it. If that cycle is 45 days, you need enough cash on hand to cover 45 days of expenses at any given moment, not just this month's expenses, because the money coming in today is often payment for work you did over a month ago. Practice 3. Negotiate payment terms actively instead of accepting whatever a client proposes. Requesting a deposit up front, invoicing more frequently instead of waiting until project completion, or negotiating shorter payment terms can dramatically shrink the gap that creates cash flow problems in the first place. Practice 4. Resist the temptation to overexpand purely because demand is currently strong. Growing at a pace your cash reserves can actually support, even if that means turning down some growth opportunities in the short term, is almost always safer than growing as fast as demand allows and hoping the cash works itself out. Practice 5. Separate profit from cash in how you think about the business day to day. Check your actual bank balance and upcoming obligations regularly, not just your revenue and profit numbers, because profit is a useful long-term measure, but cash on hand is what actually pays this week's bills. Let me walk you through a story that illustrates this clearly, because the pattern becomes a lot more concrete once you see it play out over time. A woman named Priya started a commercial cleaning business 3 years ago, cleaning offices and medical buildings under nightly contracts. Her business idea was genuinely strong. She priced her services competitively, delivered reliable, high-quality work, and within her first year had signed contracts with 8 different office buildings, more demand than she'd initially expected to land that quickly. By every measure that matters for evaluating an idea, product quality, market demand, customer satisfaction, Priya's business was clearly succeeding. And then, in her second year, she signed her biggest contract yet, a large medical office complex that represented nearly a third of her total revenue on its own. The contract was excellent news. The payment terms attached to it, net 45, meaning payment 45 days after each invoice, were standard for a client that size, and Priya didn't think twice about accepting them. To service that new contract, she had to hire 2 additional cleaning staff immediately, purchase new equipment suited to a medical facility's stricter cleaning standards, and cover several weeks of payroll and supplies before that first invoice was even due, let alone paid. Her existing smaller contracts, which paid faster, had previously covered her operating costs comfortably. But the sheer size of this new contract, combined with its slower payment terms, created a cash gap large enough that by the 3rd month after signing it, Priya was struggling to make payroll for staff who were doing excellent, reliable work on a business that, averaged out over the full year, was clearly profitable. She came dangerously close to having to lay off staff or take on high-interest short-term debt just to bridge that gap, despite running, by almost every meaningful measure, a genuinely good business. What ultimately saved her wasn't a better idea. Her idea hadn't changed at all. What saved her was renegotiating that medical contract to invoice bi-weekly instead of monthly, shrinking the payment gap significantly, combined with building a small cash reserve over the following 6 months, specifically earmarked for exactly this kind of timing gap, rather than treating every dollar in her account as available for immediate reinvestment into growth. Priya's business today is larger and more stable than it was during that near crisis, and the idea underneath it never needed to change. Only the way she managed the money moving through it did. 3 mistakes people make around cash flow, even after understanding this concept intellectually. Mistake 1. Assuming being busy automatically means being financially healthy. Priya was extremely busy during her near crisis, busier than she'd ever been, with more contracts than ever before, and she still nearly couldn't make payroll. Busy and cash healthy are not the same thing, and conflating them is one of the most common ways business owners get blindsided. Mistake 2. Treating cash reserves as something to build eventually, once the business feels more established, rather than something to prioritize from the very beginning, even in small amounts. The businesses that survive unexpected cash gaps are almost always the ones that started building a buffer early, even a modest one, rather than waiting until they felt they could afford to set money aside. Mistake 3. Accepting whatever payment terms a client proposes without negotiating, especially as a contract grows larger and the terms attached to it matter more. A large contract with slow payment terms can be more dangerous to a small business than a smaller contract with fast payment terms, even though the larger contract looks more impressive on paper. Size alone doesn't determine whether a contract is good for your cash flow. Timing does. If you're currently running a business or thinking about starting one, here's the reframe I want you to walk away with. If your business is struggling, don't automatically assume the problem is your idea, your market, or your execution in the way most people picture execution, meaning quality of work or customer service. Look specifically at your cash flow first. Look at the timing gap between when you spend money and when you receive it. Look at whether you have any reserve at all to cover that gap during a slow month, a big new contract, or an unexpected expense. For a huge share of businesses that fail, that gap, not the underlying idea, is the actual, fixable root cause. If you made it this far, think about your own business, or a business idea you're considering, and ask yourself honestly, do you know your actual cash conversion cycle? The real gap between spending and getting paid? Do you have a reserve built specifically to cover that gap? Tell me in the comments where you stand on this. Honestly, even if the honest answer is that you've never actually calculated it before. If this video helped you see a struggling business, your own or someone else's, more clearly, hit like so it reaches more people, and subscribe for more videos like this every week. I'm Jasmine. and I'll see you in the next one.